Welcome, and thank you for joining me. My name is Beverly Packard, and I'm a member of the New Hampshire ServiceLink Aging and Disability Resource Center, the ADRC team, also known as ServiceLink Resource Centers. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, in conjunction with the state of New Hampshire, established ServiceLink Resource Centers to provide unbiased, confidential information and decision support, including one-on-one assistance to individuals and their family members and/or caregivers at no cost to the individual or to the caregiver. For family caregivers, like many of you watching, ServiceLink staff have training and national certification, which allows them to provide family caregivers with caregiver counseling and education, such as the powerful tools for the caregiver support model that I'm about to introduce to you, funding for respite, and options for long-term supports and services. There are 13 local offices in New Hampshire, with one right here in Keene. ServiceLink ADRC offices are accessible and we're welcoming. I'll leave you with a phone number and a list of the offices in the state with more information about the family caregiver support we provide at the end of the presentation. Welcome to Managing Stress. Today's presentation is based upon powerful tools for caregivers. It's a self-education program for family caregivers that has been disseminated in 41 states across the United States. Since the program's inception, a great deal of research, evaluation, and revision has been done to ensure the program's continued value and success. The 6-week Powerful Tools for Caregivers class has been shown to have a positive impact on caregiver health for a diverse group of caregivers, including rural, ethnic minorities, adult children of aging parents, well spouses, partners, caregivers at differing stages in their caregiving role, living situations, financial and educational backgrounds. Data from the class participant evaluations indicate that the Powerful Tools for Caregivers program improves self-care behaviors. That means increased exercise, use of relaxation techniques, and medical checkups. Also, management of emotions, reduced guilt, anger, and depression, and an increased utilization of community resources. Now, the program does use a script to ensure that the program maintains the same positive outcomes for families and that the same information is covered wherever it's offered. So today, we'll be focusing on tools that will help you to manage the daily stresses and those challenges that you face as caregivers. Now let's take a look at the difference between an acute illness and a chronic illness. Caregiving to someone with a chronic illness requires a different mindset than caring for someone with an acute illness. With an acute illness like the flu or pneumonia or an appendicitis, we often set aside our own lives until the illness passes. Well, this approach is not effective when our family member has a chronic illness, such as a stroke, Alzheimer's disease, or Parkinson's. With an acute illness, the cures are available. With a chronic illness, there are no cures. No treatment will take the illness away. However, in many cases, a lot can be done to manage a chronic illness. With an acute illness, it's short-term. Our life is changed for a few days, but then the problems go away. With a chronic illness, it's long-lasting. A chronic illness has ongoing impact, and the problems and the challenges do not go away. As a chronic illness progresses, caregiving responsibilities often increase. With an acute illness, there's a return to normal. The person's health and everyone's life returns to pretty much normal. With a chronic illness, normal certainly changes. A chronic illness often means a permanent change from what was. With an acute illness, you're dealing with certainty. Chronic illness, uncertainty. Usually, we can't stop the impact of an acute illness. Usually we cannot stop the impact of a chronic illness on a family member. However, we are responsible for our own self-care. It's critical that we don't become a second victim. It's sad when a person says, you know, my mother was the ill person, but her illness destroyed my father. So it's not selfish to think about your own health and your well-being as caregivers. When you take care of yourself, everyone benefits. And now let's talk about stress. Stress is the reaction we experience when the demands placed on us are too much to cope with. While some stress can be positive, too much stress can affect us in negative ways, both physically and emotionally. One of the most important things that we can do, both for ourselves and for the person that we provide care for, is to take care of ourselves. It's important that we thrive and not just survive. And an important tool for thriving is being able to recognize and manage stress. So steps to managing stress. Recognize the warning signs early. It's easier and more helpful to make changes early to reduce stress. Identify the sources of stress. Ask ourselves, okay, what is causing stress for me? What causes the most stress for each of us may be quite different. And then identify what you can and what you cannot change. This involves asking the following questions. What do I have some control over, and what can I change? And then take action. Taking some action to reduce stress gives us a sense of control. So taking these 4 steps to reduce stress is critical to self-care. Now we're going to identify some of the signs and the sources of stress. You know, each of us has warning signs that tell us that we're experiencing stress. If we identify and respond to our early warning signs, we can prevent the destructive impact of stress. But you know what? Too often, we don't recognize the early warning signs, or we ignore them. So I'm going to read a list of warning signs, and I'll bet that some of these you can identify with. So some warning signs. Forgetfulness. How about some irritability? Eating more. Ugh. Getting sick. Ugh. Crying easily. You just can't concentrate. You don't care. Getting headaches. High blood pressure. And feeling resentful. So the sources might be, well, you just got way too much to do. Those that are caring for a person with some dementia, it's those repeated questions. Feeling of inadequacy. When your spouse says, I want to go home. Family disagreements. lack of sleep, those unreasonable expectations, interruptions, the inability to say no, and the lack of help from siblings. So remember, the earlier that we can identify the warning signs, the better. So what happens when you neglect stress? Well, there's increased health problems. You know, stress can cause a breakdown in communication with others, and stress-related emotions such as irritability and anger often adversely affect our relationships. There's burnout, depression, and decreased quality of care. So, you know, stress is really a fact of caregiving. There's no getting away from it. We can't eliminate it, and we can't stop it from occurring. So we've talked about the first two steps, the warning signs and the sources. And the third important step in managing stress is to clearly identify what you can change and what you cannot change. We only increase our stress and frustration if we try to change things over which we have no control. Have you ever said, "Oh, if only he would change"? But it's important to remember we can only change ourselves. We cannot change another person. And sometimes this means we need to let go. And now we'll talk about some tools to reducing stress. So the fourth step in dealing with stress is to take action. You know what? You gain nothing if you only identify the warning signs. You must actively do something to reduce the stress. But it's easy to get tangled up in those barriers. Some of the barriers to taking action frequently include, well, you just can't think of what to do. Maybe choosing too difficult of an activity. Maybe you've selected an activity to do that you really don't want to do. And postponing stress reduction. For example, this occurs when a stress reduction activity is planned too far into the future. For example, if you need to get away, so you plan a weekend at the beach for 3 months from now. Well, this is a positive step, but if you need a break now, waiting 3 months may be way too long. So it's important to recognize and then remove those barriers. Stress reducers are activities that help us to relax, are soothing and pleasurable, make us feel good, and something that we can build into our life on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be elaborate. So it could be something that you've done in the past, something that you're doing now, or something that you could do in the future. So what can you do? Take a walk. You can find some humor in situations. Do something that you like to do. Listen to classical music. Escape in a mystery book. Get together with a friend. Go to bed earlier. Try not to do everything. Say no and mean it. Have a cup of tea. Watch a good movie. Do some deep breathing. Meditate. How about going dancing? Delegate responsibilities. Exercise and go swimming. Now, keep in mind, stress reducers are very personal. An activity that reduces stress for one person may not be a stress reducer for another. So it is personal. It suits you. There are many ways to reduce stress, but what's important is finding what is pleasurable and what works for you. The little things that we do to relieve stress can make a big difference. And a tool to help ensure that you're going to do a pleasurable activity is to make an action plan. Because when you write something down and you say it out loud, the activity is more likely to happen. An action plan is an agreement or a contract with yourself to do something that you want to do. So, what are the parts of an action plan? Again, it's something that you want to do. It's not something that someone else thinks that you should do. You want to select something that will help you to feel better and take better care of yourself. An action plan is an I want to, not a should do. Make sure that it's reachable. An action plan is to be something that you can easily complete in the next week. You want to succeed. It's important to be realistic about what you can do. Needs to be behavior specific. The more specific you can be about what you will do, the better. For example, I'm going to take better care of myself. Well, that's not very specific. But making an appointment for a physical checkup, walking 3 times a week, or asking someone to stay with your care receiver for one morning are all specific behaviors. Then it needs to answer these questions. What? What are you going to do? I know, I will read a book for pleasure, or I will walk. How much are you going to do it? I am going to read 1 chapter or walk for 2 blocks. When will you do this? Well, I will read first thing in the morning before I get out of bed, or walk in the mid-afternoon when mother is sleeping. And how often? How often will you do the activity? I'm going to do this 3 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it's better to commit to something 2 or 3 times a week and exceed your action plan than to commit to doing something every day and fail because you only did it 6 days, not 7, because you want to set yourself up for success. So my action plan for this week is, this week I will knit. How much, Bev, are you going to do this? I'm going to do it for 30 minutes. When? After supper. And how often? I'm going to do it 3 times. So notice that my action plan was very specific in regard to what I will do, the amount that I will do it, and when I will do it. And really, really important, I started out by saying, I will. It's important to say, I will, when you state your action plan, and not to say, oh, I will try. So based on today's presentation, I hope that you'll remember these 4 items. It really is critical to take care of yourself. It's important to identify warning signs and sources of stress. It's important to take action to relieve your stress. You know, and action plans are a tool to help you reduce stress. So I do want to thank you for listening today. And if you're interested in gathering more information for caregiving or other supports and issues, and if you'd like to be on our mailing list for upcoming classes for Powerful Tools for Caregivers, please feel free to call toll-free 866-634-9412 or call Monadnock ServiceLink at 603-357-1922. Once again, thank you for joining. And you know what? Really, be sure to take care of yourself.